You know that feeling, right? You found your seat, you're all buckled in, and the plane starts pushing back from the gate. You're about to fly thousands of miles, crossing oceans, continents, and everything just works. From the pilot's checks to air traffic control, it all feels so routine, so standard, so incredibly safe. But have you ever really stopped to think about why? Who's the one making sure it all fits together like a perfect puzzle? I mean, it's a pretty incredible feat of global teamwork when you think about it. The safety rules on a flight leaving Tokyo are basically the same as one leaving Toronto. The way pilots talk to controllers is standardized, whether they're flying over the Atlantic or the Pacific. This harmony doesn't just happen by accident. So who is the invisible architect making all of this possible? Well, that's exactly what we're going to figure out. The answer is a UN agency called the International Civil Aviation Organization, or ICAO for short. And to really get a grip on their massive impact, we're going to look at what they do. We'll start with how they became the world's aviation authority and built a global safety net. Then, we'll pivot to the huge challenge they're facing now, climate change, and what the flight to net zero looks like. And finally, we'll see why their job is about a whole lot more than just writing rules.
Okay, let's get into it. The best way to think about ICAO is not as some kind of global sky police. They aren't out there writing tickets. Instead, think of them as the authors of the planet's official instruction manual for flying. They're the ones who write the rules that all 193 member countries agree to play by, just so everyone's on the same page.
So how in the world do they get every country to agree? Well, it comes down to this really clever difference right here. On one hand, you have a standard. That's a hard rule, a must-do. A great example is requiring every airline to have a formal safety management system. But on the other hand, you have a recommended practice, which is more like a you really should do. It's a best practice, like using new tech to get people on the plane faster. This little bit of flexibility is the secret sauce that makes global cooperation possible. And you know where those rules are the most critical? ICAO's #1 job, safety. Just think about it. Back in the early days of aviation, the biggest problem was just making sure a plane could fly across a bunch of different borders and follow the same basic safety rules everywhere. That's the exact problem ICAO was created to solve. So how do they actually build this global safety net? Well, it's all about layers of responsibility. At the very bottom, you've got the airline itself. They have to run their own safety management system, or SMS. That's their day-to-day process for finding and fixing risks. Then you've got the government of that country, which runs a state safety program, or SSP, to watch over all the airlines. And who's watching them? Yep, that's where ICAO comes in with its audits. And that final layer of oversight has a very official name. USOP. Now, this isn't about sending in police. It's about ICAO sending in a team of experts to audit a country's entire safety system. They check to see if the government is actually doing its job and enforcing the rules. It's this whole system of checks and balances that has made flying so incredibly safe. But here's the thing. After basically solving this safety puzzle, ICAO and the entire world of aviation are now staring down an even bigger, more complicated challenge: sustainability. Because the very thing that makes flying so amazing, the way it connects our world, also comes with a pretty serious environmental price tag. And the scale of this challenge is just massive. Just take a look at this. It's showing the projected growth in flights around the world. It doesn't matter which scenario you pick, low, middle, or high, the trend is shooting straight up. We could be looking at double the number of planes in the sky by 2050 compared to just a few years ago. That is a huge problem we have to solve.
And of course, more flights means more fuel. This chart is even more jarring. That top line, the really steep one, that shows what happens if we do absolutely nothing, if technology just stays the same. Fuel use could triple by 2070. Those other lines show what happens when you factor in new tech and efficiencies. The message here is crystal clear. Business as usual is simply not an option. We have to figure out a new way to fly.
This chart really pulls it all together. It shows us the fork in the road for aviation's carbon emissions. That rising red line, that's the business as usual path. And it leads to a world that's 2.3 degrees warmer, which would be catastrophic. All those other lines bending down show different futures. Ones where new fuels, new tech, and smarter flying help us hit our climate goals. The massive challenge for ICAO today is closing that gap between the red line and the green ones.
And look, this isn't some abstract problem for the distant future. The World Meteorological Organization confirmed that in 2024, the planet already temporarily shot past that critical 1.5-degree warming limit. The alarm bells are officially ringing, and that puts a ton of pressure on a fast-growing industry like aviation to change, and to change right now.
So what's the plan?
Well, ICAO has come up with something it calls a basket of measures, and that name is really deliberate. It's their way of saying there is no single magic bullet here. The solution has to be a whole mix of different strategies, all working together to nudge aviation toward a net zero future.
So, what's in the basket? First up, you've got new aircraft technologies, just building more fuel-efficient planes. Then, flying smarter, more efficient routes. But the real game changer, the one everyone's talking about, is sustainable aviation fuels, or SAF. And for the pollution that we just can't get rid of yet, there's a last resort, a carbon offsetting program called CORSIA. Let's dig into that one a bit.
Okay, so let's zoom in on CORSIA. This is basically a system where if an airline can't cut its own carbon emissions, it has to pay for them somewhere else. They do that by buying carbon credits from approved projects around the globe. Things like planting new forests or building wind farms. You can see some of the approved program types right here. It's a way to make polluters pay. But honestly, it's also the most debated part of the entire plan.
Now, the solutions aren't just for when the plane is in the air. A lot of it happens on the ground. You know when a plane is sitting at the gate with the lights and AC on? Usually that's powered by a tiny jet engine in the tail. Well, airports are now starting to just plug the planes into the airport's power grid and using electric tugs to move them around. It might seem like a small thing, but when you multiply that across thousands of airports every single day, the fuel savings are just enormous.
And remember we talked about flying smarter? Here is a perfect example. In Nigeria, they implemented something called free route airspace. Basically, it lets planes fly more direct, optimized routes instead of being stuck on rigid, predefined highways in the sky. And the result? They saved over 3,500 tons of CO2. It's all about finding efficiencies with every single flight.
So for this last part, it's really important to get that ICAO doesn't exist in some clean, technical bubble. No, its work is tangled up in some of the most complicated issues of our time: global politics, biodiversity, and the very future of how we live on this planet. And for a perfect example of that, just look at what happened with Russia after its full-scale invasion of Ukraine. As this quote from Ukraine's deputy prime minister shows, when Russia failed to get re-elected to ICAO's main governing council, it was seen as a huge political statement. It's just a reminder that even in the super technical world of aviation, you can never escape global politics.
And the mission just keeps getting bigger. For decades, the environmental focus was all about noise and carbon emissions. But now, big global agreements are pushing ICAO to also think about biodiversity, about how things like where you build an airport, the paths planes fly, and even the contrails they leave behind might affect wildlife and ecosystems on the ground. And that, ultimately, is the new challenge. For 100 years, aviation was all about conquering distance, connecting people. The mission for the next 100 years has to be about doing all of that while also protecting the one planet we all share. It's a massive responsibility, and the aviation industry is right at the center of that conversation.
Which leaves us with this final big question. ICAO was created to solve the challenge of safety. Now it has to solve the challenge of sustainability, all while navigating the constant storms of global politics. So, as our skies get busier and our planet gets warmer, can one organization really do it all? The future of how we fly really depends on the answer.